Hi guys, it is Dom here. Just had the wonderful opportunity to chat to Dani Filth of Cradle of Filth about the band's legacy, their success, their first live record in 20 years, which is coming out, a new studio album as well. When is that going to see the light of day? An Ed Sheeran collaboration, which is coming, and some of the other interesting collabs that Dani has done over the last, many decades of his career now, and sort of what he thinks of the British heavy metal scene and so much more. So check this out, sit back, relax, enjoy. Thank you so much for making the time, giving your time to watch this, to listen to it, however you're consuming it. I appreciate it. We'll see you soon. Thank you. So yeah, Dani, lovely to sit down with you today. Thank you for taking the time out. Before we talk about the record and the new stuff you've got coming out and the live record you've got coming out, I'd like to ask you a question, because sort of a bit of a word association one, really. You've achieved a great deal. You've achieved a great deal of success in your career, and I wanted to ask you, at this point in your career, in your life, as a person and as a professional musician, how do you define success? What does it mean to you at this point?
A second yacht.
Yeah.
I don't know. I suppose. I guess it's recognition. It's always nice when people say, "Oh my God, yeah, really nice to meet you." Massive influence on me growing up, etc. It's also double as well, because a lot of people are like, "Yeah, I used to be a massive fan of you 20 years ago."
Yeah,
which is a common one, and you go, "Oh, great, so you're not now then? Yeah, brilliant. All right, jog on."
Yeah.
I guess, success and still surviving it. After all these years, and still making a career, still not having a proper job.
Yes, living the dream, absolutely. And the second sort of part of that word association that we're going to do is legacy. Obviously, do you think too much about the legacy of not only Cradle of Filth as a band, but also yourself, because you have been, quite the figure in alternative music, in heavy metal, for the last decades, from infamous, whether it's infamous merch or albums that transcend into the mainstreams like Bittersweet or Midian. There's a lot of stuff Cradle of Filth has done as a band, but you have done as an artist as well. So do you pay much attention to your legacy and the wider legacy of Cradle of Filth as it stands?
No.
No? Okay.
No. Well, no, I mean, legacy would imply that you're ending the end of your tenure. You're reaching the end of your career, and hopefully it's far from that. Things go really well, actually, for the band of present. We've had a bit of, I'd like to say, the last 8-9 years have been a bit of resurgence for the band, only scuppered by those pesky kids, the pesky thingy. I've forgotten what it's called now. Coronavirus outbreak, pandemic. God,
yeah,
literally forgot about it. Legacy would imply. So no, don't really think about that, to be honest. Probably shows I don't think about things too deeply.
So it's all right, man. It's all right. I mean, that the reason why I asked about the legacy is, again, because there was so much that you have achieved, and that sort of talk about that success. I think, there's a lot to be proud of there, and I think that's kind of where I was coming from with the question. I certainly don't anticipate Cradle of Filth to be ending anytime soon, but certainly, what you've been able to do in terms of selling records, in terms of bringing British heavy metal to an American audience, to a global audience, as well as into pop culture with some of your recent collaborations. That's where that question came from.
Okay.
I think. Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't want to imply that I was saying that Cradle of Filth is ending. That's certainly not what I mean to say. In terms of your own history, I know you say you don't think too deeply over stuff, but if you look at who you were, in the early 90s when you were coming out, with Cradle of Filth, and the kind of person that you were, and the person you are now, what would you say you've kind of learned? Sort of how have you changed and developed as a person through the artistry that you've been able to create, through the records, through, you know, creating film, all that stuff? How would you say you've changed and developed over time through the time of Cradle of Filth?
Well, it's an inevitable maturing, isn't it? I mean, I think when you first start, there's a sudden like urge to literally splurge out and do everything all at once because you don't know how long it's really going to last. If you manage to, you know, be in a certain level band for 30 years, you're kind of giving yourself a little bit of breathing space.
Yeah.
Not saying we could do any like jazz odyssey, you know, things and start experimenting with reggae outbursts and what have you, but it afforded us a somewhat, you know, reasonable amount of experimentation and branching out into various things and taking our times with things and being a little bit spoiled about them. And we've learned a lot of things. We've been through great management. We've got amazing management at the moment. We've built up a really great body of people around us. In fact, I just came back from touring the States for co-headline Devildriver.
Yeah.
And Des, obviously the singer of Devildriver, is our manager and one of my best friends. So that was a unique experience. And I think it's just getting better. Like everybody uses that euphemism, you know, that terminology, age is like fine wine. But I'm really feeling like, because I don't, you know, I'm a bit of a Peter Pan character. I like I said, never had a proper job, never grown up.
Yeah.
So I'm still in that sort of exploratory stage where everything's still delighting me. And the pandemic only fueled that even further because everybody was obviously thinking, fuck, you know, it all could get knocked quite quickly on the head. Is it ever going to return? I mean, we're in a bit of a weird state of play at the present because of the whole, you know, Russian scenario.
Yeah.
That's had a knock-on effect with fuel and bus hire, and people are really now not being able to afford to do a lot. So tours are becoming very difficult. There's a lot of American bands I've spoken to, big bands as well, who have not touring Europe on the head for a while. A lot of English and mostly European bands have not touring America on head for a while. And now there's even talk of, you know, like bigger taxation by venues on merch. You know, places taking bigger cuts of the band's merch, which is their life's blood, since everything's digital platforms nowadays, and you know, physical products down. And America's now talking about upping the cost of touring there, the price of the visa, which is cool. I mean, it's about 30 quid for them to come over here. It's in the thousands for us to go there.
Yeah.
So it's not all doom and gloom though. It's obviously, I think, as everything goes in cycles as well, we're seeing a bit of a re-emergence, a bit of a reaffirmation of the whole metal community.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it still. I've always been excited.
Good. I mean, talk about excitement. How was it going back to the US? Obviously, you're with friends, you're with Devildriver. You know, I did want to ask that. It's only just finished a few weeks back. How was that for you going back over there? Obviously, traditionally, as far as I'm aware, you've always been very welcome over in the US and had a good following there. How did you enjoy going back? Obviously, again, you mentioned some of those struggles that you face.
This is actually our third tour since the pandemic. We managed to squeeze one in while it was actually going on. We had to go and get some really special visas for that. And last year we went out in support of Danzig, which was incredible. You know, that's an arena tour there. America has always embraced us since 2006 was the first time I was flown over to New York by Mayhem Fierce, the American branch of Music for Nations at the time, for a week to do interviews. We don't get that nowadays, you know?
No.
So yeah, they've always taken us to their bosom, their ample breast. And I think I just appreciate a more eclectic mix of music. We've always in America never gone out really, aside from one tour we did with Septic Flesh and Satyricon in support. the rest of the sports we've had have always been really a mixed bag, and Americans really like that. So I'll give you some examples of tours. It's like Us Typo Moonspell, Us DKY, Us 69 Eyes for Inches of Blood, you know, Us Butcher Babies, Nea Bliviscaris, Us Ginger. It's always very different. Us Danzig and Crowbot, Us Devildriver and Black Satellite. Americans just seem to be, I don't know whether it's because it's a more of a, I know Europe's a big place, but when you break it down into, you know, countries and you tour those countries, it's a well-trodden path.
Yeah.
As America, a big I mean, this Double Trouble Live with Devildriver is actually undertaking 3 legs. So it's 3 separate tours of the US and Canada. So maybe that's it. Maybe they're just appreciative of bands touring there. Not that it's a stagnant scene. I mean, fucking, they've got people playing all the time, but I just noticed the difference in you know, the fact that we particularly don't go out with, I don't know, the Dimmus and the Behemoths. There's no need to.
Yeah, you feel appreciated.
Well, I just think the music scene, metal, and you know, if metal covers a vast, you know, array of bands, but I think it's just appreciated for that. Maybe Europe's just a bit too sort of used to it, you know, used to bands touring every 5 seconds.
That's an interesting point I hadn't really thought about. Yeah, maybe that is it. Maybe it's a more special, especially bands coming over like yourself, coming over from the UK or Europe. It's much more.
Well, it's going to get more infrequent if the cost of the visas are going to continue to climb.
Yeah, I think it's a big issue for sure. In terms of just going back there to talk about being appreciated, you know, before I talk about the double album you've got, the live album you've got coming up and the new stuff, I did want to, you know, sort of look at some of the things that you've got coming up or some of the things that have happened in recent years in terms of some of the collaborations you've done. And I wanted to ask about, it's kind of my perception as a listener, so you have to sort of correct me if I'm wrong here, Dani, but I feel like you and Cradle of Filth have kind of been instrumental in bringing heavy metal into pop culture, with, you know, working with like the, you know, Bring Me the Horizon. Obviously, you've got something coming up with Ed Sheeran, which is fantastic. And these artists all cite Cradle of Filth as an inspiration or a creative inspiration for you, you know, for themselves. Do you feel like you've kind of, you know, do you feel like you are an inspiration point? Cradle of Filth is an inspiration point in a quite unique way compared to other heavy metal bands for artists that bridge that gap to pop music. Again, Bring Me the Horizon do, you know, blended into the mainstream, and Ed Sheeran obviously is the mainstream, but you were also doing that as well and have continued to do that in your own way. Do you feel like you've kind of led the way as a metal artist in that with some of these collaborations?
Well, it's hard for me to say that, you know. I don't know, if people see that, then it's good. Maybe it's just because we've been around for a while. It's great when people cite us as an inspiration. I mean, I recently did a similar thing with a band called Twisted, and that was like metal-y rap. It was cool. I like strange collaborations. I like the juxtaposition, especially with the Ed song. Like, it just PKs everybody's interest. Everybody's like, a lot of interviews, especially the foreign journalists, there's like a susceptible crackle like throughout the entire interview. Like, they're just itching to ask that question. Oh, it's one question more to ask. Yeah, and then it just pops out, you know.
Right.
But yeah, I like these collaborations because I've always seen what we do as something bigger. Maybe a little bit too, what's the word? We jump ahead of yourself a little bit too much, a bit too ambitious. But I like ambition. It hasn't stopped, but you know, likes of Metallica and what have you. And I just like the cross pollination between different things and the audacity and the weirdness of it. You know, if they told me we're doing it, you know, a single with Ed Sheeran, I'd be like, yeah, of course, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you think it's going to be. It sounds like Ed Sheeran. It's got acoustic guitar. It's got his voice on it. It's got my voice on it. And we managed to squeeze a blast beat into the song.
Wonderful.
And it's not like an Agadoo type jovial track to garner attention. It's going to be a charity single as well. He's got a great charity. We've got a great charity we want to reach out to and support. I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised at like how it sounds, because it is a perfect marriage, and it is, it's a heavy metal song, it's a rock song. But yeah, I can't comment about everything else. I don't know how really we've been as a band, but yeah, it's just nice to hear it from time to time. Better still if somebody actually said, "Oh, you've been really inspirational. I'd like to give you this check."
Yeah,
not a check person. I got 2 of those. Got enough. But an actual sizable check.
Yeah. Fingers crossed those will keep rolling in. Talking about again, stuff that's coming out for you. You've got Trouble in the Double Lives coming out, which is the first live album you guys have done in 20 years. Now, what does this live album mean to you? Obviously, seeing you live means a lot to different people for different reasons, but for you as an artist who has numerous studio albums under the belt, and I know there's some studio tracks on this as well, but what is this live record, that you're bringing out, previewing new material? What does it mean to you now?
Well, believe it or not, it was actually circumstantial. And by that, I mean, because of the pandemic, our last record got delayed by a year. Our transition from Nuclear Blast to our current label, delayed by a year. In that time, we were writing, but then we had a lineup change, having done some big, what are they called? Those live streams. We encountered a lineup change, so we already pressed reset on the writing, so we were kind of stuck with 2 songs that are reminiscent and a sign of what we're doing in 2023, but obviously with new people in that, we felt like we wanted to start from scratch, as it were. Sorry, what was the crux of the question?
So I did waffle on there, but the crux of my question was, what does bringing this album out now? I know you mentioned in the press that it was a bridge between the 2 labels. What does this record mean to you? It seems like,
well, if we had when I said it was circumstantial, it might not have happened.
Right.
If the previous record pandemic hadn't happened and Existence is Futile had come out a year prior, our new album would have been out last year instead of this. So apologies to those live enthusiasts, but it was one of those things that had to happen, really. Otherwise, it probably would have been another 20 years before a live album was forthcoming. It was fortuitous as well because prior to the pandemic, we'd been out on the road for 4 years for Cryptoriana, and then it was essentially 3 years extended by the fact that we remixed and remastered Cruelty and the Beast, which is the remistress version. So we stayed out for another year. 2019 was the busiest year we've ever had in the band. It was incredible. So we had that period to plunder from, because our live engineer suddenly announced he'd been recording the majority of the shows, which we then passed over to our studio engineer to forage through. I doubt he went through everything. He said he did, but I doubt it because there was so much material, and chose, this gig you played really well. This sounded really good. I can work with this. I can bring it up to, because obviously it's just off the desk.
Yeah.
And yeah, we just thought it was a good representation. Obviously, we worked very hard on it, and we had those 2 songs. We thought, well, you know what, we'll this will be the icing on the cake. We'll give them somebody also a glimpse into, because live songs are a thing of the past. You played them, they're from albums. We always also bring it kicking and screaming into the current age, and the show that we're busy. Otherwise, those couple of songs probably would have, disappeared to the eons because we wouldn't have had a use for them. But with new people in the band, it's just a bit weird having an album with, I don't know, like 10 songs you've written as a group, and then to the previous incarnation, it was just not really the done thing. So it was fortuitous on all accounts that this is how this came about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting, and you know, obviously, again for fans that are keen to hear the new stuff, you know, it's going to be a good time. And I know that you know, you referenced the new stuff. I think you were talking to Metal Injection. You referencing She Is Fire, which is obviously the newer track that's come out, prefacing again. Obviously, it's on the live album, but prefacing the new material. You know, you mentioned that these kind of harkens back to some of that old school material, like Dusk, for example. And for yourself, then, you know, how excited are you? You mentioned you're writing some stuff, you know, at the beginning of this. How excited are you for this album to see the light of day, for fans to be able to engage with it, to enjoy it? Because again, you know, the reception to She Is Fire, and obviously the forthcoming live record is, you know, seems to be good, man. People seem to be excited about it.
Yeah, obviously, as an artist, obviously your main intention is to get the material out there.
Yeah.
And for people to like, obviously, you want people to like it. You know, I can't imagine any artist creativity, you know, is I can't imagine anybody just not interested in how it's received.
Yeah.
If they create and they put it out there, whatever format, whatever medium it may be. So yeah, obviously very excited about the new material. It's taken a while to write because the new people, they obviously had to get into the feel of the band. They're both American, and the reason for that being is that we were kind of left in a lurch about a month before we began our support tour of Danzig last year, and of course it meant there was no way we were going to, well, 6 weeks maybe, there's no way anyway we could turn around visas. So we looked toward America and found two amazing people in Zoe and Dani, and yeah, they just haven't fucked off since then. They've just been a good choice of people, good people to hang around with. And, you know, last year we were busy, summer festivals, wherever, out touring Dark Horses and Forces tour in October. So after that, we started writing. And yeah, it's been a kind of learning curve for everybody, but we've kind of broken through the crust now. In fact, the last tour was one of the first tours we actually like on days off, rather than, you know, going to shooting ranges and all you eat barbecues. And well, we did that as well. Walmart stops. We hauled, you know, we walled ourselves up in hotel rooms and actually got to finishing some of this material. And we got it to a stage now I'm really excited about it. I mean, it's got to the stage where I'm starting to feel like that scientist who needs his wife to pass him, the food under the tray, under the door in the laboratory, because I'm getting that, like, oh, I can't tear myself away from it. I'm that excited about getting it finished.
Yeah.
So yeah, naturally, very excited about people hearing it. But with that in mind, with everything else going on, the new album won't see the light of day until, well, by this time next year, I should imagine.
So a lot to wait for fans. And you mentioned obviously that excitement there about the album. One of the things I wanted to ask before we sort of round up with a couple more is about the visual side of Cradle of Filth. I remember growing up with those songs, and remember seeing the videos and just falling in love with the aesthetic of the whole band, really, and the visuals. And I wanted to ask, are you as excited now as you have been out, because obviously you have worked in, you've done some stuff in film, you've been very creative your whole career. Are you still that excited and enamored with the visual side and the aesthetic of Cradle of Filth as you are about creating the music? Is that still a passion of yours, how the band is perceived visually, how the videos come across, and that general aesthetic? Because as a fan and as someone that has grown up around that stuff, it was always, well, sometimes it freaked me out, and sometimes it was just like, this is really cool. You know what I mean? So from an artist perspective, do you still enjoy that visual side of it as well?
Well, absolutely, yeah. Thing is, I sort of find good people. Good people to work with. I've got a lot of close friends in the arts, you know, whether they're illustrators or tattooists or photographers, etc., illustrators and what have you. And always like working with, you know, the cream of the crop. I love interacting with people like that and bouncing ideas across and that. So yeah, naturally, it's once you've got the musical aesthetic together, it's always great to represent it as you perceived it in your head. Now, obviously, you never quite get there, and the budget isn't always, massive. So you make do with what you can, and yeah, it's like everything. There's only a few things you have to really get right with a band. There's a lot expected of you. You have to do like news conferences and be a face and be in these weird, ridiculous scenarios from time to time. But really, there's not a lot you've got to do aside from the music and representation of your creative force, be it video, live concerts, photo shoots, etc., album covers. No, I really revel in it. That's the fun part. I always joke once the album's finished. It's like, yeah, now the fun start. Fun start parts. The fun part starts.
Yeah.
Parker.
Yeah. It feels like you kind of had the creative. You've been able to be creative. You've been able to put it out to the world, and then you've got to be the face of British heavy metal, effectively, along with a few other people. But there is that. It feels like there is that pressure on you, because you've always kind of been in the press and always been at the front and center of it. Do you feel that pressure, or do you just kind of, again, do you revel in it at this point in your career?
Well, actually, without sounding, sound like, oh, look at him. Yeah, I do revel in it. I'm turning 50 this year. And when I was young, like my uncles who at that time were like hovering around the 40 mark, I was like, oh my God, they're prehistoric, And I wouldn't have thought, obviously, when you start a band, you never in your head visualize yourself playing, to a dog and, two people. Although we did with Emperor in Edinburgh, literally. You always imagine like this massive, you're playing Dynamo and, you're Tom Araya and everybody fucking loves you. That's how you imagine it. Mm. So to say you don't have preconceived ideas is a bit of a lie, I believe. But I personally couldn't imagine still doing this and still being the Peter Pan, still being really into it and still thinking, fucking hell, there must be something wrong with me at the moment because I'm almost 50 years old and I'm still really into all this kooky shit. I still collect toys and listen to heavy metal and design weird and wonderful things and basically do what I want.
Yeah, which is
my mum once said, you don't live in the real world. And I said, well, there is actually no rules, Mum. I can't remember seeing it on one of your tea towels that there's a rule to living and that you have to be like this. You have to have one house, two children. It's not the nuclear family anymore. The world is a big place. We're not as consigned to the history books as once were. But maybe if you lived in Russia, maybe, but or Iraq. But the rest of the world is you can do what you like, and it's what you do with it really that counts. Yeah. So it's a truly liberating time, to be honest. I do still remember being a kid, and if you saw someone who was alternative, nose piercing, whatever, and you lived in a village or whatever, they'd get a lot of shit for it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you can wear your sex, sexual on your sleeve. People accept it, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, man.
Not just sexual nature. I don't want to say that. It's all about sex, and just part of the puzzle.
Yeah, you can be who you want to be, and you don't have to.
But yeah, you put it better.
I always remember, obviously you get bought up occasionally for some of the merchandise, and it feels like back when we were younger, that sort of stuff was like, oh my God. Whereas now, people can feel a bit freer. They can wear their bands, the things they love on their chest, and if it's a little bit, if it's the type of thing that our parents or our grandparents thought was like.
Here's a prime example of that, because I was talking to someone who works for he basically writes horror reviews for things like Rolling Stone and whatever. Yeah. And we were just talking about this thing, and it's apt because it's like there was a time when we were young and everybody did it. Everybody went to their smoke encrusted local video store and got a video nasty from under the counter. Yeah. And you look back at those films now, and things were literally landing people in prison, for being X-rated. And you see more now in the opening few credits of something like a Walking Dead or a Last of Us, It's just everything's become a lot more liberal, but it hasn't turned us all into, cannibalizing savages. Not all of us, of course, you know, some like to hide that. But yeah, I think, you know, the opportunities have really opened up, and you've got AI now. I mean, in fact, our artwork for the new album is the first AI derived thing that we've ever worked.
Nice. Cool.
We just liked the look of it, and I like the style of the artist. And AI artwork to me always makes me look like I'm peering into someone's nightmares. So yeah, I try and think about the positive things, because there's a lot of negative things going on at the moment in the world, and the music industry is, you know, slowly dying on its knees and trying to struggle with the digital age, you know, even now. So yeah, good to be positive.
Yeah, an exciting time. Well, thank you so much for making the time for me. Just a couple more before we finish. The first one is to check whether I've done my job properly, really, Dani, and ask if I've missed anything. And is there anything you want to plug? You mentioned not only obviously the music, but you've been designing stuff. Is there anything you want to plug and promote before we finish up?
Not really, no. He says, and then suddenly something springs to mind. Got this. I don't know if it's going to anything is going to come of it, but have a cartoon that I'm involved with, strangely enough, Filthy Antics, that might see the light of day later in the year. It's got a couple of it's got other guest people in it from bands, and yeah, it's in the vein of kind of like Scooby-Doo. So that may see the light of day. We talked about the Ed Sheeran thing, which, you know, like I said, was a charity thing. Handful of summer festivals, not a great deal. Next year's our busy year, unless of course you live in America or South America, and then we'll see you later on in 2023.
Fantastic. And the last thing is we do a lot of work with young people, and we try and support creative young people who are, you know, trying to get into music, trying to get into art. So I wanted to ask you if there is anything...
God, no, you're going to ask me for my...
No. I'm going to change it up. Trust me on this one. Is there anything that you've taken with you your entire life, like a bit of knowledge or advice or something that it's not asking you for your advice directly, but a bit of something you've taken? It could be music related, could be life related, could be anything at all that you carry with you that you would like to share?
Well, actually, two things, very profound things.
Okay.
One, never eat yellow snow. And two, don't be a cunt.
Yep, that works. I like it. Excellent. Brilliant, Dani. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, mate.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Thank you. My pleasure.